Hi, my name is Isabelle Messner, and I will be reading a piece of mine called Jacob's View. I gave it this title because we see the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which happened in Manhattan in 1911 from the point of view of my main character, Jacob. So I decided to submit my writing to the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards because I have some older siblings who submitted their artwork and ended up winning some regional awards. So yeah, I decided to submit some of my writing because I've always loved writing and creating stories, and yeah, so I just wanted to see what happened. And here we are. Now I get to read my story to you all, and I hope you enjoy. Sweat was steadily dripping from the nape of Jacob's neck, wetting the oily ends of his hair. The drops ran all the way down around to his collarbone, finally falling and creating spots on the fabric he was cutting. Oy vey, a smear, he muttered to himself through his cigarette, but he then reminded his mind not to think such things as feeling sorry for himself. The something he needed was just around the corner. He felt it. Besides, once you got over the whole prospect of working non-stop every day, just being in New York City almost replaced his longing for true freedom. The scissors he held in his calloused hand were raising up and falling, slicing through the worthless fabric. Jacob saw the cloth that way, as it was just something he cut day after day, not something he would ever dream of wearing. This quality of cloth was reserved for the wealthy people throughout the city. On a boat, he sailed to the city for so many days, waves crashing. No matter how seasick he got, the thrill that he was going to America kept him conscious. Eventually, he was able to have a tiny apartment. It was hardly even an apartment with a single room and peeling walls. Jacob was fortunate to even have a home to go to at the end of the day. The one window on the wall closest to the ocean displayed a view of Lady Liberty every night, and it was the last thing he saw before he closed his tired eyes. Those eyes almost closed, but the bell made them shoot open. Jacob dropped the scissors and clenched his hand over and over, trying to relieve the cramped muscles. His hand could hardly move, and Jacob knew it would be at least an hour before he would be able to move his fingers normally. As he turned his head toward the girls getting up from their sewing machines, he caught the eye of one of them. It was the girl, Yetta, whom he fancied, but he knew that she did not feel the same way. Even so, Jacob felt that they had a connection so strong it could not be explained. He needed to move on. Jacob could not waste everything chasing someone who didn't understand. Still, they held each other's eyes for a split second, though it felt like eternity. Then she looked away. Suddenly that wonderful moment ended, and Jacob averted his eyes as well. Annoyed, he threw his cigarette into the wastebasket nearby. Yet, as he looked around, Yetta was making her way toward him. Once she reached him, she stopped abruptly. Yetta, who had looked so confident walking toward him, suddenly seemed quite shy. Jacob coughed awkwardly. "I was just wondering if you finished," she said, not making eye contact. Just about. Why?" "Well," she took a deep breath, "perhaps we could spend the evening together. I heard that group over there is going dancing." Jacob couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I mean, if you don't want to, that's just fine," she said, looking at her feet. No, wait," Jacob said as she began to turn away. She faced him. "Actually, I'd like to go dancing very much." She smiled softly, and her eyes looked right into his. They stayed there for a second, then wavered to something behind him. The eyes that held so much happiness a second ago were now filled with fear. Jacob looked around and was faced with a force of heat. 7 feet away was the wastebasket, and inside the basket was a blaze leaping closer and closer to the ceiling. Jacob was reminded of a cigarette, tossed innocently inside. Immense guilt filled him. Yetta reacted right away. "Fire!" she shouted, and turned the heads of the workers, making their way down the stairs and climbing into the elevator. The ones at the top saw the fire and all at once began shoving and pushing through the others, trying to get out before it was too late. Yells of "Fuoco," "Fire," and "Fire" bounced off the walls. Jacob caught sight of a few water buckets and dashed to them. Water splashed out of them as he returned to the overwhelming fire. He threw the liquid at the fire as hard as he could, but it was no use. It was growing too quickly. "Yetta, come on, we have to leave. It's everyone for themselves." He tried to grab her away from the phone, and it dropped and hung suspended from its cord. Yetta had tear tracks shining on her face. "No, I have to go up. No one's warned the 9th floor." She broke away from his arms and raced away into the blaze that now took up half the room. Jacob ran to her side. "Then I'm coming with you." They ran together up to the 9th floor, where the fire had engulfed the entire room. No one was in sight. Only destroyed sewing machines and wooden chairs were there, but they were nearly consumed by the blazing fire. Neither one of them wanted to say the truth, that there was no one left. The adrenaline was still coursing through Jacob's body, but it had dimmed somewhat. Yetta was frantically searching for a sign of life in that room on the 9th floor, but Jacob didn't even move. Suddenly he heard the sound of splintering wood and whirled around. One of the burning beams holding the ceiling was unstable and was about to fall, blocking the narrow doorway to possible safety. "Yetta, this is our last chance. We have to go now." He was yelling so loudly through the smoke he thought his throat was about to snap. "Yetta!" he desperately yelled again. Yetta turned around and saw the immediate peril they were in. She dashed over, and Jacob grasped her hand to prevent separation. "All gone. No one left," she whispered, sobbing. I know. And Jacob did truly understand, but there was no time to comfort her at that moment. The blaze was spreading faster and faster, and the beam was getting more unstable by the second. Jacob knew that what was behind that narrow door was not much better than where they were, but it was the only exit in sight. Suddenly, Jacob felt a shudder through the floor, and he was filled with dread. He whipped his head around to look at Yetta, and he knew that she had felt it too. They both looked up at the shaking, blackened beam, and everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The beam fell, blocking the doorway, and sparks flew everywhere. Their one chance of survival was gone, but Yetta would not give up. Instead of staying where she was, she darted to the back of the room to the stairwell. Jacob raced after her and pulled her back. "Let go of me! Don't you want to live?" she shouted at him. "Of course I do," he shouted back, but it wasn't much over the roar of the flames surrounding them. "But there's nowhere to go. The stairwell will fall under your weight." "It can't be over." She struggled to get the words out, her voice hoarse and strained. "It won't be." She ran into the safety of his arms, and they collapsed together to the ground, holding each other, trying to block out the sound of splintering wood and the force of heat closing in. Releasing Yetta, Jacob stood up. "Where are you going?" Yetta asked through coughs. She looked up at him. Jacob thought, even though she glistened with sweat and her clothes and hair were singed, Yetta could not be more beautiful right at that moment. He held his hand out to her. "I'm not going anywhere." Jacob coughed dryly. "I promised you a dance." Yetta could not conceal a minuscule smile and accepted his hand. Jacob pulled her up from the wooden floor so that they were standing face to face once more. They looked at each other, and it was as if they were trying to forever ingrain the features of their faces into their minds. Both of them were terrified beyond measure, but there was something about the certainty of their deaths that steadied them somehow. Yetta took Jacob's hand and placed it on her waist, and they grasped each other's hands. She then wrapped her arm around his shoulder, clinging to him, burying her face into his chest. They slowly swayed back and forth, the fire still surrounding them, coming closer. All they could do was imagine that this terrible disaster wasn't reality, and it was just a dream that would end shortly, and they would soon wake to the morning sun. Thank you.